Hello and welcome. My name is Alan and we are back with more Diary of Anne Frank. So yeah, she kind of talked about what she's into and about feeling she's going through some changes, but yeah, let's hop into this. Tuesday, April the 11th, 1944. My dearest Kitty, my head's in a whirl. I really don't know where to begin. Thursday, the last time I wrote you, everything was as usual. Friday afternoon, Good Friday, we played Monopoly. Saturday afternoon, too. The days passed very quickly. Around 2 o'clock on Saturday, heavy firing began. Machine guns, according to the men. For the rest, everything was quiet. Sunday afternoon, Peter came to see me at 4:30 at my invitation. At 5:15, we went to the front attic where we stayed until 6. There was a beautiful Mozart concert on the radio from 6 to 7:15. I especially enjoyed Klein Nachtmusik. I can hardly bear to listen in the kitchen, since beautiful music stirs me to the very depths of my soul. Sunday evening, Peter couldn't take his bath because the wash tub was down in the office kitchen, filled with laundry. The two of us went to the front attic together, and in order to be able to sit comfortably, I took along the only cushion I could find in my room. We seated ourselves on a packing crate, since both the crate and the cushion were very narrow. We were sitting quite close, leaning against two other crates. Malshi kept us company, so we weren't without a chaperone. Suddenly, at 8:45, Mr. Van Daan whistled and asked if we had Mr. Dussel's cushion. We jumped up and went downstairs with the cushion and the cat and Mr. Van Daan. This cushion was the source of much misery. Dussel was angry because I'd taken the one he uses as a pillow, and he was afraid it might be covered with fleas. He had the entire house in an uproar because of this one cushion. In revenge, Peter and I stuck two hard brushes in his bed, but had to take them out again when Dussel unexpectedly decided to go sit in his room. We had a really good laugh at this little intermezzo, but our fun was short-lived. At 9:30, Peter knocked gently on the door and asked Father to come upstairs and help him with a difficult English sentence. "That sounds fishy," I said to Margot. "It's obviously a pretext. You can tell by the way the men are talking that there's been a break-in." I was right. The warehouse was being broken into that very moment. Father, Mr. Van Daan, and Peter were downstairs in a flash. Margot, Mother, Mrs. Van Daan, and I waited. 4 frightened women need to talk, so that's what we did until we heard a bang downstairs. After all was quiet, the clock struck 9:45. The color had drained from our faces, but we remained calm, even though we were afraid. Where were the men? What was that bang? Were they fighting with the burglars? We were too scared to think. All we could do was wait. 10 o'clock. Footsteps on the stairs. Father, pale and nervous, came inside, followed by Mr. Van Daan. Lights about, tiptoe upstairs, or lights out, tiptoes upstairs. We're expecting the police. There wasn't time to be scared. The lights were switched off. I grabbed a jacket and we sat down upstairs. What happened? Tell us quickly. There was no one to tell us. The men had gone back downstairs. The four of them didn't come back up until 10:10. Two of them kept watch at Peter's open window. The door to the landing was locked. The bookcase shut. We draped a sweater over our nightlight, and then they told us what had happened. Peter was on the landing when he heard two loud bangs. We went downstairs and saw a large panel was missing from the left half of the warehouse door. He dashed upstairs, alerted the home guard, and the four of them went downstairs. When they entered the warehouse, the burglars were going about their business. Without thinking, Mr. Van Daan yelled, "Police!" Hurried footsteps outside. The burglars had fled. The board was put back in the door so the police wouldn't notice the gap. But then a swift kick from outside sent it flying to the floor. The men were amazed at the burglar's audacity. Both Peter and Mr. Van Daan felt a murderous rage come over them. Mr. Van Daan slammed an axe against the floor and all was quiet again. Once more the panel was replaced, and once more the attempt was foiled. Outside, a man and woman shone a glaring flashlight through the opening, lighting up the entire warehouse. "What the?" mumbled one of the men. But now their roles had been reversed. Instead of policemen, they were now burglars. All four of them raced upstairs. Dussel and Mr. Van Daan snatched up Dussel's books. Peter opened the doors and windows in the kitchen and private office, hurled the phone to the ground, and the four of them finally ended up behind the bookcase. End of part 1. In all probability, the man and woman with the flashlight had alerted the police. It was Sunday night, Easter Sunday. The next day, Easter Monday, the office was going to be closed, which meant we wouldn't be able to move around until Tuesday morning. Think of it, having to sit in such terror for a day and 2 nights. We thought of nothing, but simply sat there in pitch darkness. In her fear, Mrs. Van Daan had switched off the lamp. We whispered, and every time we heard a creak, someone said, "Shh, shh." It was 10:30, then 11, not a sound. Father and Mr. Van Daan took turns coming upstairs to us. Then at 11:15, a noise below. Up above, you could hear the whole family breathing. For the rest, no one moved a muscle. Footsteps in the house, the private office, the kitchen, then on the staircase. All sounds of breathing stopped. 8 hearts pounded. Footsteps on the stairs, then a rattling at the bookcase. This moment was indescribable. "Now we're done for," I said, and I had visions of all 15 of us being dragged away by the Gestapo that very night. More rattling at the bookcase, twice. Then we heard a can fall and the footsteps receded. We were out of danger so far. A shiver went through everyone's body. I heard several sets of teeth chattering. No one said a word. We stayed like this until 11:30. There were no more sounds in the house, but a light was shining on our landing right in front of the bookcase. Was that because the police thought it looked so suspicious, or because they simply forgot? Was anyone going to come back and turn it off? We found our tongues again, and then there were no longer any people inside the building, but perhaps someone was standing guard outside. We then did three things: tried to guess what was going on, trembled with fear, and went to the bathroom. Since the buckets were in the attic, all we had was Peter's metal waste paper basket. Mr. Van Daan went first, then father, then mother, but mother was too embarrassed. Father brought the waste basket to the next room, where Margot, Mrs. Van Daan, and I gratefully made use of it. Mother finally gave in. There was a great demand for paper, and luckily I had some in my pocket. The waste basket stank. Everything went on in a whisper, and we were exhausted. It was midnight. Lie down on the floor and go to sleep. Margot and I were each given a pillow and a blanket. Margot lay down near the food cupboard, and I had made my bed between the table legs. The smell wasn't quite so bad when you were lying on the floor, but Mrs. Van Daan quietly went and got some powdered bleach and draped a dish towel over the potty as a further precaution. Talk, whispers, fear, stench, farting, and people continually going to the bathroom. Try sleeping through that. By 2:30, however, I was so tired I dozed off and didn't hear a thing until 3:30. I woke up when Mrs. Van Daan lay her head on my feet. "For heaven's sake, give me something to put on," I said. I was handed some clothes, but didn't ask what. A pair of wool slacks over my pajamas, a red sweater and black skirt, white understockings, and tattered knee socks. Mrs. Van Daan sat back down on the chair, and Mr. Van Daan lay back with his head on my feet. From 3:30 onward, I was engrossed in thought and still shivering so much that Mr. Van Daan couldn't sleep. I was preparing myself for the return of the police. We'd tell them we were in hiding, or if they were good people, we'd be safe. And if they were Nazi sympathizers, we could try to bribe them. "We should hide the radio," moaned Mrs. Van Daan. "Sure, in the stove," answered Mr. Van Daan. "If they find us, they might as well find the radio. Then they'll also find Anne's diary," added Father. "So burn it," suggested the most terrified of the group. This and the police rattling on the bookcase were the moments when I was most afraid. Oh, not my diary. If my diary goes, I go too. Thank goodness Father didn't say anything more. There's no point in recounting all the conversation, so much was said. And I comforted Mrs. Van Daan, who was very frightened. We talked about escaping, being interrogated by the Gestapo, phoning Mr. Kleiman, and being courageous. "We must behave like soldiers, Mrs. Van Daan. If our time has come, well then it'll be for Queen and country, for freedom, truth, and justice, as they're always telling us on the radio. The only bad thing is that we'll drag the others down with us." After an hour, Mr. Van Daan switched places with his wife again, and Father came and sat beside me. The men smoked one cigarette after another. On occasion, an occasional sigh was heard, and somebody made another trip to the potty. and then everything began all over again. 4 o'clock, 5:30, I went and sat with Peter by his window and listened so close we could feel each other's bodies trembling. We spoke a word or two from time to time and listened intently. Next door, they took down the blackout screen. They made a list of everything they were planning to tell Mr. Kleiman over the phone, because they intended to call him at 7 and ask him to send someone over. They were taking a big chance, since the police guard at the door or in the warehouse might hear them talking, or might hear them calling, but there was an even greater risk that the police would return. I'm enclosing their list, but for the sake of clarity, I'll copy it here. Burglary. Police in building, up to bookcase, but no farther. Burglars apparently interrupted, forced warehouse door, fled through garden. Main entrance bolted. Kugler must have fled through the second door. Typewriter and adding machine safe in black chest in private office. Mieps or Bep's laundry in wash tub in kitchen. Only Bep or Kugler have key to second door. Lock may be broken. Try to warn Jan and get key. Look around office. Also feed cat. For the rest, everything went according to plan. Mr. Kleiman was phoned. The poles were removed from the doors. The typewriter was put back in the chest. Then we all sat around the table again and waited for either Jan or the police. Peter had dropped off to sleep, and Mr. Van Daan and I were lying on the floor when we heard loud footsteps below. I got up quietly. "It's Jan." No, it's the police," they all said. There was a knocking at our bookcase. Miep whispered. This was too much for Mrs. Van Daan, who sank limply in her chair, white as a sheet. If the tension had lasted another minute, she would have fainted. Jan and Miep came in and were met with a delightful scene. The table alone would have been worth a photograph. A copy of Cinema and Theater, open to a page of dancing girls and smeared with jam and pectin, which we'd been taking to combat the diarrhea, 2 jam jars, half a bread roll, a quarter of a bread roll, pectin, a mirror, a comb, matches, ashes, cigarettes, tobacco, an ashtray, books, a pair of underpants, a flashlight, Mrs. Van Daan's comb, toilet paper, etc. Jan and Mia were, of course, greeted with shouts and tears. Jan nailed a pinewood board over the gap in the door and went off again with Miep to inform the police of the break-in. Miep had also found a note under the warehouse door from Sliegers, the night watchman, who had noticed the hole and alerted the police. Jan was also planning to see Sliegers. So we had half an hour in which we put the house and ourselves to rights. I've never seen so much a transformation as in those 30 minutes. Margot and I got the beds ready downstairs, went to the bathroom, brushed our teeth, washed our hands, and combed our hair. Then I straightened up the room a bit and went back upstairs. The table had already been cleared, and we got some water, made coffee and tea, boiled the milk, and set the table. Father and Peter emptied our improvised potties and rinsed them with warm water and powdered bleach. The largest one was filled to the brim and was so heavy they had a hard time lifting it. To make things worse, it was leaking, so they had to put it in a bucket. Mr. Sleegers was asleep, but his wife told Jan that her husband had discovered the hole in the door while making his rounds. He called on a policeman, and the two of them searched the building. Mr. Sleegers, in his capacity as night watchman, patrols the area every night on his bike, unaccompanied by his two dogs. Or accompanied by his two dogs. His wife said he would come on Tuesday and tell Mr. Kugler the rest. No one at the police station seemed to know anything about the break-in, but they made a note and came first thing Tuesday morning to have a look. On the way back, Jan happened to run into Mr. Van Hoven, the man who supplies us with potatoes, and told him of the break-in. "I know," Mr. Van Hoven calmly replied. "Last night when my wife and I were walking past your building, I saw a gap in the door. My wife wanted to walk on, but I peeked inside with a flashlight, and that's when the burglars must have run off. To be on the safe side, I didn't call the police. I thought it wouldn't be wise in your case. I don't know anything, but I have my suspicions." Jan thanked him and went on. "Mr. Van Hoven obviously suspects we're here because he always delivers the potatoes at lunchtime. A decent man." It was 1 o'clock by the time Jan left, and we'd done the dishes. All 8 of us went to bed. I woke up at 2:45 and saw Mr. Dussel was already up. My face rumpled with sleep. I happened to run into Peter in the bathroom just after he'd come downstairs. We agreed to meet in the office. I freshened up a bit and went down. "After all this, do you still dare to go to the front attic?" he asked. I nodded, grabbed my pillow, and with a cloth wrapped around it, and we went up together. The weather was gorgeous, and even though the air raid siren soon began to wail, we stayed where we were. Peter put his arm around my shoulder. I put mine around his, and we sat quietly like this until 4 o'clock, when Margot came to get us for coffee. We ate our bread, drank our lemonade, and joked we were finally able to again, and for the rest, everything was back to normal. That evening, I thanked Peter because he had been the bravest of us all. None of us have ever been in such danger as we were that night. God was truly watching over us. Just think, the police were right. At the bookcase, the light was on, and still no one had discovered our hiding place. "Now we're done for," I whispered at the moment, but once again, we were spared. When the invasion comes and the bombs start falling, it'll be every man for himself, but this time we feared for those good, innocent Christians who are helping us. We've been saved. Keep on saving us. That's all we can say. This incident has brought about a whole lot of changes. As of now, Dussel will be doing his work in the bathroom, and Peter will be patrolling the house between 8:30 and 9:30. Peter isn't allowed to open his window anymore since one of the keg people noticed it was open. We can no longer flush the toilet after 9:30 at night. Mr. Sleegers has been hired as night watchman, and tonight a carpenter from the underground is coming to make a barricade out of our white Frankfurt bedsteads. Debates are going on left and right in the annex. Mr. Kugler reproached us for our carelessness. Jan also said we should never go downstairs. What we have to do now is find out whether Sleegers can be trusted, whether the dogs will bark if they hear someone behind the door, or how to make the barricade, all sorts of things. We've been strongly reminded of the fact that we're Jews in chains, chained to one spot, without any rights, but with 1,000 obligations. We must put our feelings aside, and we must be brave and strong. Bear discomfort without complaint. Do whatever is in our power, and trust in God. One day this terrible war will be over. The time will come when we'll be people again and not just Jews. Who has inflicted this on us? Who has set us apart from all the rest? Who has put us through such sufferings? It's God who made us the way we are, but it's also God who will lift us up again. In the eyes of the world, we're doomed. But if, after all the suffering, there are still Jews left, the Jewish people will be held up as an example. Who knows, maybe our religion will teach the world and all the people in it about goodness. And that's the only reason we have to suffer. We can never be just Dutch or just English or whatever. We will always be Jews as well. And we'll have to keep on being Jews, but then we'll want to be. Be brave. Let's remember our duty and perform it without complaint. There will be a way out. God has never deserted our people. Through the ages, Jews have had to suffer, but through the ages, they've gone on living, and the centuries of suffering have only made them stronger. The weak shall fall, and the strong shall survive and not be defeated. That night, I finally thought I was going to die. I waited for the police, and I was ready for death, like a soldier on the battlefield. I'd gladly have given my life for my country, but now what I've been spared. My first wish after the war is to become a Dutch citizen. I love the Dutch. I love this country. I love the language, and I want to work here. And even if I have to write to the Queen herself, I won't give up until I've reached my goal. I'm becoming more and more independent of my parents. Young as I am, I face life with more courage, and I have a better and truer sense of justice than Mother. I know what I want. I have a goal. I have opinions, a religion, and love. If only I can be myself, I'll be satisfied. I know that I'm a woman with inner strength and a greater deal of courage. If God lets me live, I'll achieve more than Mother ever did. I'll make my voice heard. I'll go out into the world and work for mankind. I now know that courage and happiness are needed first. Yours, Anne M. Frank. But we'll go ahead and end that there. Woo! That was a long one. It was only one chapter. So yeah, even though it took that long to read, it was probably the longest chapter in the book. by and far. It took so long, but yeah. Well, I cannot use my fingers. Afterward. I'm trying to see how many we've got. 341 pages, and that took us to page 263. So yeah, just under 80 pages left. That was a big chapter, but it was all about that event of burglary, but also about Anne kind of finding what she wants to do in life. Which is absolutely wonderful. When you're coming to understand and believe, yeah, this is what I want to do in life. And things are starting to click together. It's pretty good. There we go. Cold. While the wildfires are going on in LA, it's been nothing but snow and ice here, so. But yeah. You can only wonder, because you're in hiding, you're trying to keep from being found. You do have allies, but you can't necessarily trust anyone on the street. And when you hear this noise downstairs, you don't know. You honestly do not know. And so I can understand the fear. You don't know if the burglars themselves were Nazi sympathizers or would have understood people in hiding. But this is a time of war when you're trying to just still have a life, some shred of humanity, because many resources have been made scarce. Everybody's struggling, but there's always going to be those who will say, I'll survive if I have to rob, if I have to steal from others. It's not a good thing. It's understandable. You can understand why people do it, because if the situation's so bad, you don't have a choice. I mean, what are you supposed to do? But yeah. It's crazy because they're just up there in the meantime while all this is going on around them. They're just staying hidden. And you never know the intentions of another. in situations like this. So yeah, it's just so yeah, you have got to do certain things to get by, especially you've got to do certain things when you are in hiding just for survival. Yeah, it's crazy. But we'll go ahead and end this episode there. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.